welcome. Thanks for watching. Obviously, let's start with what just happened. The Toronto Maple Leafs didn't just lose Game 7, they collapsed in front of a packed home arena in the most thoroughly humiliating way possible. And I couldn't do like a post stream. I couldn't even hit record right after the final buzzer because this wasn't just a Leafs loss. This was just too perfect. It was too on the nose. It wasn't just a game, it was like a thesis statement, a final undeniable confirmation that everything we've been saying about the structure of this hockey team, this illusion of hope, this spectacle of failure, it's not cynicism, it's prophecy. And that prophecy was fulfilled once again tonight. A 6-1 collapse at home in Game 7. Only 4 other teams have lost that badly in a Game 7 at home. Fans booing, jerseys flying. The core 4 really putting up a goose egg on the score sheet. 75 shot attempts for the Florida Panthers in just 2 periods. You don't even have to embellish it. And to think that the Leafs held, I believe, the Panthers to like 3 slot shots in Game 6. And then this happens. Again, like, the Leafs wrote the script themselves and handed it to us with the ink basically still wet. And this wasn't just a one-off or a fluke. Again, it is a culmination of this team's design. A team that is engineered just to be good enough to sell you hope, but never built to deliver on it. And this isn't about heart or effort. It's about a franchise that has, for decades, monetized this catharsis instead of pursuing like actual transcendence or transformation. The Leafs don't break our hearts. They package heartbreak as a seasonal product line. So no, I didn't want to rush to do a post-game reaction. And it's very much not my thing on this channel. But I feel like as material conditions deplete, hockey, as I've talked about, and many other sports, soccer internationally, and many other sports are going to become more effective as statecraft. And so I'm going to be doing more of this on this channel. But yeah, I didn't want to rush into doing like a post-game reaction video because this isn't a reaction game. It's a revelation game. And it essentially, like, if you're still holding out hope that next year is going to be any different, you should really ask yourself, how many times can you watch the same story unfold and still call it a surprise? Game 7, Leafs Panthers, Scotiabank Arena. You could literally feel the anxiety curdling in the building before puck drop. 20,000 souls holding their breath, waiting for what many knew was the inevitable. This wasn't hope, it was dread, pure and simple. 2 periods later, as the Panthers scored yet another unanswered goal, jerseys started raining onto the ice. Not celebratory tosses, mind you, but angry, resigned projectiles launched in disgust. The final score was 6-1 Panthers, and another historic humiliation for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And yet, nobody's really surprised. We all knew how this story would end because it's always the same. The Leafs don't merely lose, they collapse spectacularly. Each playoff run isn't a competition, it's a ritual sacrifice of dignity, a tradition as sacred as it is predictable. And on Sunday night, it wasn't just a hockey game, it was a revelation, a brutal exposure of something deeper, a franchise and a fan base caught in a cycle of perpetual failure. But what if losing isn't a bug of this system? What if it is actually the point of it? Because let's be clear, this was not a bad game for the Leafs. This was a historic level of incompetence. This was simply not understanding the task. The Leafs tied an NHL record for the largest home loss in a Game 7, 5 goals, while surrendering 75 shot attempts in just 2 periods. That's not hockey. That is a firing squad. 8 straight winner-take-all defeats, 7 consecutive Game 7 losses since 2013, and an unbelievable 0-6 in Game 7s during the Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner era. This isn't a random statistical quirk. This is systemic rot. Toronto hasn't won a cup since 1967. They haven't even made the finals since that time. We've gone from black and white TV to Twitter hot takes without a single meaningful playoff run from the Leafs. The numbers do not lie. This team is not built to succeed. They're constructed for failure. They are branded by disappointment, and the fans, they're forced to be witnesses to their own emotional abuse. And that's what the Matthews and Marner, Nylander, Tavares core represents. The greatest contradiction in modern hockey. Each regular season, these guys put up video game numbers, filling highlight reels, selling jerseys, and hyping up what becomes this inevitable playoff run. But every spring, they vanish. They become missing people. In the time, they just completely vanish in the times where it matters most. Game 7, 0 combined points. Again, this franchise faces collapse, and its superstars are nowhere to be found. I shouldn't say 0 combined points. Nylander had an assist in the single goal in this game, but for the most part, have not been able to deliver in any way. Yet, management and fans cling desperately to what is this failing group, because admitting that they failed would mean admitting that this entire narrative that has been carefully constructed around this core has been a lie and always has. It's a lie, and it's always been a lie. These 4 players are not merely hockey stars. They're symbols of a sunk cost fallacy, an emotional investment in branding power. And moving on from them is going to be admitting that the Leafs' entire modern project was fundamentally flawed from the very start. So instead, the Leafs double down on their failure. They sell hope instead of results, and year after agonizing year, their fans accept these horrible defeats. And this is where things get into the bleak realm of of just socioeconomics, because the Leafs aren't just a hockey team, they're Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. They're the flagship content farm, an endlessly profitable heartbreak machine. MLSE doesn't need champions. They need playoff appearances, playoff runs. No matter how futile, means tickets, merch, sponsorships, media rights, podcasts, and radio hits. It's that hope. The hope sells, especially when hope remains permanently unfulfilled. Look at franchises like Tampa or Vegas, teams built explicitly to win Stanley Cups. Winning requires expensive change, risky roster moves, and an acceptance that profit comes second to glory. Toronto, by contrast, perfects mediocrity because it's profitable. A single playoff round win in Toronto triggers street parades, commemorative documentaries, and jerseys marked, "This is our year." Losing is literally built into the business model. And not like actually planned, but just like the incentives are all there. And that brings us to a very uncomfortable parallel that I've pointed out. And that's that the Toronto Maple Leafs and Canada's New Democratic Party they operate on the same kind of level. They're both institutions that thrive not by delivering tangible victories, but by selling this endless narrative of hope. For the Leafs, a Stanley Cup would end decades of profitable disappointment. And for the NDP, forming government would mean actually governing, making hard choices, risking alienating their base, and potentially losing their narrative of eternal virtuous opposition. Leaf fans mercilessly dissect every failing of their team management, yet somehow these same critical faculties evaporate when these fans who are progressive engage in politics, because suddenly that strategic failure becomes pragmatic, electorally necessarily. And this is where you get these endless compromises. And this is what I'm talking about, how it trains you to process other things that should not be processed this way in a way that we process sports. Endless compromises become justified by the fantasy of incremental progress and a hope that's just around the corner. It is a selective critique, and it's completely astounding because fans of sports teams demand accountability from stars, but the leaders of political parties have this like unlimited moral credit. And if political party, if they're these political parties are somehow exempt from the same structural critiques that they lob at the Leafs. And again, it's because of that training. It's like that. This is just, it's that like the training of the Leafs victimization complex is transferable 1-to-1 with NDP supporters. And that gets me to the next socioeconomic thing that I wanted to talk about in regards to this. And that's like, in Marxist terms, the term praxis means action guided by theory, guided by like an understanding of the moment. Transformative, tangible change in the world, in material reality. The Leafs represent the exact opposite of that. It is anti-praxis. Every season, Leafs management tweaks the margins. Another coach or another depth forward, another gritty veteran at the trade deadline or in a free agent snag. But the system itself remains untouched. It is a illusion built on capital, built on the hope for change, built on a spectacle meant to keep fans believing that this might be the year. The Leafs perpetually promise transformation, yet deliver total collapse. Yeah, it's performative capitalism distilled into professional hockey. The endless rhetoric of progress without actual progress. Losing really becomes like ideological and even accepted and a celebrated norm, packaged as character building rather than systemic rot. For the longest time, that's how the Leafs were. It's just that narrative has grown stale after more losing. And that's because they aren't building a team. They're maintaining this closed loop of failure and hope because it's infinitely more profitable than having success. And a huge aspect of what makes that system be maintained, because if it was a hockey team, if they were the Rangers and they suck this much, no one would fucking care about the Rangers. It wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be the mecca of hockey. And the reason that is because of, I've talked about it a lot, that's because hockey is statecraft. Hockey is not just a capitalist product that is sold. It is Canadian nationalism at its most cynical level. Each year, Leaf fans shift their allegiance after being eliminated to whichever Canadian team that remains. It's this patriotic transfer of loyalty that is designed to paper over increased regional divisions. Look at Alberta. Separatist rage sublimated into Connor McDavid goals. And as much as it seems like I'm not saying that this is planned, but hockey is hockey. It's not accidental. It's just statecraft. That's what sports is. Hockey Night in Canada doesn't just broadcast hockey. It like brokers Canadian unity by directing political tension into the playoff bracket. A great example of this is, remember the Quebec Nordiques? They weren't just not viable as a hockey franchise because they weren't profitable. It's because they represented an uncomfortable nationalistic force that opposed Canada and opposed like the idea of hockey as statecraft. And you can see this operating in the opposite way with what's happening right now, what's going to happen if the Oilers advance to the finals. Because those Alberta grievances will be managed through the spectacle of sports. But the difference was with the Nordiques was that Quebec nationalism was always far more complicated and actually rooted in a cultural thing that had a greater belief in it that could actually threaten the Canadian state. It was existential. And so the Nordiques had to vanish. And what do you know? As soon as they left, they won the Stanley Cup. And while Alberta gets Oilers playoff runs, it's not Alberta's team. It becomes Canada's team. And that would never happen with the Quebec Nordiques, and that's why they're not a team. And that's also why we might get them again. They might come back because as like the retreat of this unity continues and the balkanization of the imperial core continues, we're going to see more regionalism, which would make it so that a team like the Nordiques would be far more viable in like a new capitalist framework that we're shifting into. So don't count out the Nordiques. making a return someday. But yeah, my point is that Leafs fandom, is thus co-opted into reinforcing essentially like the Canadian settler colonial mythology, which is unity without addressing structural contradictions. It's a whole part of the ethos of Canada. And in observing that, it begs the question, what if I say we as in people who are watching this, what if Leaf fans redirected that obsessive passion towards something meaningful? Housing, indigenous justice, climate activism. Imagine harnessing the energy of Leafs grievance, the intensity of that fan base, and applying it to real things that matter, actual mass politics. Because that's why this has to exist, is because it replaces mass politics. And instead, we have this emotional investment that becomes trivialized and mocked and is pretty much childish, because it is childish. And that's why we get that feeling that if your team won, it would change the world, because we're experiencing mass politics, but it is happening in a thing like it is being extracted away from anything that would have any effect on anything. And that's like the function of what sports is. And that's why I'm interested in this, and that's why I'm like focusing on this in the next little while, is that because dismissing this passion that people have for sports misses a massive opportunity. People genuinely care deeply, painfully about their teams. Leaf fans are not apathetic. They're politically disengaged. And they're politically disengaged for the most part because they're engaged in the Leafs, and because they're like engaged in the Leafs, they can't engage in politics in a genuine way because they've been so trained by the way in which they absorb sports. That's the way they absorb politics, which is just detrimental to actually being able to understand politics in a way that can get to the point of mass politics emerging. It's purely identitarian and based on the individual experience. And that emotion that gets brought up, that tribalism, that collectiveness, when properly mobilized, would actually have there is a force there that could change society. If you want people to touch grass, we have to meet them where they're at. And that's, don't mock the passion, because the passion could be redirected and we should help redirect it. And that's what we can do by helping build the demystification of these wretched sports franchises. Because I need to admit, I was once exactly this fan that I'm describing. I used to believe in the Leafs, in the Raptors, in the idea that sports could deliver something that could be transcendent if you just cared enough about it. My family has like super deep roots in the Leafs. Like, I'm from Sudbury. I'm from like the same town that Joe Bowen, the guy who calls the Leaf games, is from. My family is close family friends with George Armstrong, who was captain of the Leafs last time that they won the Stanley Cup. A close personal friend of my grandfather. All right, there it is. There's my dad at 7 years old with my Uncle George, George is named after George. So this is the thing, is that even like with me working for MLSE, it wasn't just fandom, right? There's a level of inheritance that people have in a connection to this team because of their parents' connection to it. It's identity. And for a long time, like many people, I clung to it with a irrational loyalty that only sports can command in the West. People have this type of belief in something in other places in the world because they believe in something greater. Here, we believe in nothing because there is nothing. So instead, we believe in sports. I believed it deeply. In 2019, I didn't just watch the Raptors make history. I participated in it. I planted the Lucky Looney under the court before Game 6 against Milwaukee. I convinced myself and everybody around us that doing such a thing would create a cosmic shift in the probability of the Raptors winning. And they did that night. And when they got past the Golden State Warriors and when Kawhi Leonard lifted the trophy, it felt like proof. Like my little esoteric ritual had somehow bent the universe. And that summer, we all believed in something bigger than basketball. But then reality came back. And just this time, 2021 against Montreal, game 7 at home, lifeless. And for me, like something legitimately cracked. I realized I wasn't just watching a game, I was participating in a corporate ritual of manufactured drama and monetized despair. The Raptors' victory was once a moment of personal magic. It started to look less like a miracle and more like a marketing campaign. And that lucky loony, just another artifact of the content vault. Why? I took a video of it. And leaving it all behind it wasn't easy. But letting go of that belief felt like stepping out of a legitimate cult. Like it improved my life quality massively. And might sound melodramatic, but it's true. And so many Leaf fans who are hearing this know that it's true. The pain and the detachment, it's there, but it's necessary. Because once you step back, it becomes impossible to unsee all the things that I've been pointing out. These teams aren't sacred institutions. They're brands. They don't thrive on victory. They profit off of hope. And I wasn't a fan. I was a consumer that they were selling it to, passively consuming it without demanding, without dictating how the resources were spent. It's such a classic microcosm of capitalism, of neoliberal society. And that's why I did this stream. That's why I wanted to do this video, because it's just a great example. So ultimately, the Leafs and this entire situation is a perfect allegory of capitalism. They embody the neoliberal logic, selling perpetual optimism without ever delivering it. Real change, which means breaking up the core, abandoning the false hope, would mean risking the profits and stability that make it so that accountability is not a thing. So instead of having to face the music and face the fans, face the fan base, the cycle just keeps running. And the more that it runs, the less chance that they have to face accountability. Because as soon as Game 7 was over, the first thing that people started talking about was Mitch Marner. And that's the cycle continuing. Or what if Stolarz didn't get hurt? Like all of these contingencies arise that you start looking at, that makes it so that you start convincing yourself, oh, you know what? Not as bad as this result. And I just need to say, being a Leaf fan is not a choice. It's an inherited condition. It's a psychic wound passed between generations. Because that's the thing. It is a perpetual self-replication cycle of misery. And even if you're born into it, like anything else that you're born into, you might not have control of the conditions that you were born into. But you do know once you see that cycle, you can act accordingly. And that's when the choice arises. And that's why I'm pleading to people who feel the way that this team has made you feel. Because you have a choice. Continue consuming this internal disappointment, or recognize that the Leafs and Leafs fandom and all the capitalist spectacles that surround it are constructed. They are constructed to manipulate you into a certain way that upholds both capitalism and the Canadian state. And that I'm not exaggerating. Like, it's where we're at. It's where we're at in the world. Rejecting this system, rejecting the Leafs, means rejecting that mental exploitation that it subjects you to. Demanding structural change, as in literally going and spending your time and money focusing on other things or just another hockey team. Because the Leafs do not have to represent this inevitable heartbreak. They can instead symbolize power that the fans have to demand something better. more meaningful, something more meaningful, something more transformative. Because in the end, unless you do that, it's just going to be more build up and then more letdown. And so it's very much time to choose. Keep accepting the cycle or break it once and for all. That's it.
Oh, land of blue, unending skies, mountains strong and sparkling snow, a sense of freedom in the wind or the emerald fields below. To thee we brought our hopes, our dreams, for thee we stand together, our land of peace, where proudly flies the maple leaf forever. Long may it wave and grace our own blue skies and stormy weather. Within my heart, above my home, the maple leaf forever.
Ladies and gentlemen, last minute of play.
Oh, maple leaf around the world, you speak as you rise high above, of courage, peace, and quiet strength of the Canada that I love. Remind us all our union bound by ties we cannot sever. Bright flag revered on every ground, the maple leaf forever. Long may it wave and grace our own blue skies and storms.